Hi, and welcome to Reddit Confessions. Tonight's story starts with this. She was mid-laugh when I walked out of the party. And she didn't even notice, not right away. But when she did, everything stopped. It was raining, but not outside. The rooftop bar was sealed tight with glass panels, fairy lights dripping like vines from the ceiling, and laughter echoing like birds in a cage. That sound, laughter, used to mean joy to me. Tonight, it sounded like betrayal dressed up in cheap wine. I didn't leave in anger. There was no slam of the door, no shattered glass, no raised voice. I just stood there with my hand on the railing, feeling the condensation from my untouched drink melt into my palm. I looked at her, at the way her body leaned into his, her smile unfiltered, eyes bright like she was 22 again. And I knew I didn't belong in that room anymore. So I left. No text. No nod. Not even a glance back. I walked straight out the side exit like I was invisible, and maybe I was. It took her 8 minutes to realize I was gone. I know because when I got back to the car, I watched the live feed. Yeah. I know how that sounds. But she had convinced me months ago to set up a safety app on her phone. I never used it, until tonight. 8 minutes after I disappeared, she stopped laughing. Her face dropped. She looked toward the spot I had been standing, the one she hadn't looked at all night. She whispered something to the man next to her, then pulled her phone from her clutch. No messages from me. Just silence. And that's when the camera caught it. Her hand trembled. Slightly. She dropped her smile like it was a prop. The people around her kept laughing for a while, not realizing the center of their orbit had collapsed. She walked off alone, out of view. That was 4 nights ago. Since then, she's called me only once. She didn't ask where I went. She didn't ask why I left. She only asked, "Did you see something I need to explain?" And I said nothing. Because honestly, I don't even know what I saw that night. I just know it changed everything. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my car for hours, engine off, phone in my hand, screen dark. There was so much I wanted to say, but none of it felt right. Every time I opened the message window, my thumbs hovered. The words that formed in my head were petty, emotional, or downright pathetic. You embarrassed me. You made me feel like a stranger. Did you forget I was even there? But I deleted every draft because none of them felt like they would make a difference. Because honestly, what could she say that would unsee what I saw? I had watched her face as she told that story, the one where I was a walking punchline, and it wasn't told with love. It wasn't some cute callback to our early days. There was no fondness. No wink toward me. Her eyes were locked on him, that Beck guy with the smug face and shirt just tight enough to show off the work he clearly did on his arms. She wasn't reliving a memory. She was replacing it. And that burned in a way I hadn't expected. She didn't come home that night. She didn't say where she went. The next morning, I woke up on the couch, my back aching, my phone finally showing a single unread message. Did you get home safe? That was it. Not, I missed you, not, where did you go? Just a generic check-in like I was a coworker who left early from a meeting. I didn't reply. Not out of spite. Out of something worse, I had nothing left to say that wouldn't come out like a whimper. Around noon, she walked in. Hair down, sunglasses still on, carrying a green smoothie like it was a normal Sunday. I didn't get up. I just watched her move around the kitchen like a guest in someone else's house. She didn't even look surprised that I hadn't come back to bed. She set the smoothie on the table, then turned to me with a casual, "Hey." That word. Just, "Hey." No follow-up. No explanation. No acknowledgement of the elephant stomping around our tiny apartment. I finally spoke. My voice cracked before I could stop it. Did you have fun? She blinked. At the party? I nodded slowly, like we were strangers trading small talk at a bus stop. Yeah, she said, shrugging. It was okay. You left kind of early. I stared at her. Not because of what she said, but how she said it. She didn't ask why I left. She didn't even flinch. She poured herself some cold brew and took a sip, then added, Beck thought maybe you weren't feeling well. There it was. Beck. She said his name so easily. Like we were all just part of the same friend circle, just a bunch of adults having a nice time, no hard feelings. Like he didn't spend the night replacing me in conversations, in glances, in unspoken energy. I was fine, I said quietly. I just didn't feel like being a joke. That got her. She set her drink down a little too fast. It clinked, a bit louder than she intended. Her expression faltered for half a second. What's that supposed to mean? You know what it means, I replied, still seated, still calm. You made me the punchline in front of a room full of people. You didn't even notice I was gone until after the laughter stopped. She crossed her arms. It was just a story, Everett. You used to laugh at it, too. Back when it was ours, I said. Back when you looked at me while you told it. Silence. Then came the defense, soft, automatic, like she'd practiced it. You're reading into everything. I didn't mean it that way. You're just sensitive lately. That word again. Sensitive. The same word she used last month when I told her I felt like we were drifting. The same word she threw at me 2 weeks ago when she left me on read all day and said she was just overwhelmed. The same word that took all my feelings, gift-wrapped them in shame, and handed them back with a smile. I stood up. She stepped back just a little. I think you should stay at Trina's for a few days, I said, calmly, like I wasn't screaming inside. What? Her voice cracked this time. I need space. Real space. Not just emotional limbo while you figure out if I still fit in your life. She looked stunned, as if I'd just flipped the script in a play she thought she had memorized. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Eventually, she just walked to the bedroom and started packing a duffel bag in silence. And while she did, I sat back down at the kitchen table, heart pounding, hands shaking, wondering what I had just done. The silence in the apartment was sharp after she left. Not peaceful, sharp, like a vacuum where noise used to live. I didn't turn on the TV. Didn't put on music. I just sat with the stillness, letting it crawl over me like a wet blanket I couldn't shake off. I should have felt victorious, I guess. I was the one who asked her to leave, the one who finally stood up for himself. But it didn't feel like strength. It felt like standing on the edge of a frozen lake, watching the cracks crawl toward me. I didn't hear from her for the rest of that day. No texts. No missed calls. Not even a passive-aggressive emoji. And that, somehow, was worse than a fight. If she had yelled, at least I would have mattered enough to make angry. But this? This was just nothing. The next morning, I decided to clear my head and go for a walk, something I hadn't done in months. I ended up circling our block 3 times before I found myself standing in front of the tiny cafe where she and I used to go every Sunday morning. She liked their lavender lattes. I liked the silence between sips. Now, I stood there staring through the window like a ghost looking in on his old life. I almost turned around. Almost. But then I saw something that froze me mid-step. Callie. Sitting at the far table near the corner window. She wasn't alone. It wasn't Beck. It wasn't anyone I recognized. Just some man, maybe mid-30s, clean-cut, navy jacket, too perfect posture. He leaned forward when she laughed. Not flirty. Intense. Like he was studying her. She looked different. Not guilty. Not sad. Relaxed. Like she hadn't been kicked out of her own home less than 24 hours ago. I ducked back quickly, heart racing like I'd just been caught stealing something. My first thought was to walk in and confront her, ask her who he was, demand to know why she looked so at ease while I was unraveling. But I didn't. Instead, I pulled out my phone. I hesitated. Then I called her. Inside the cafe, I watched her glance at her screen. Her smile faltered. She didn't pick up. She pressed the button to silence it and slid the phone back into her coat. But that wasn't what broke me. It was what happened next. The man sitting across from her leaned in and said something, I couldn't hear it. But she nodded, pulled the phone back out, and toggled something on the screen. I recognized the interface instantly. The shared location feature. The one we had enabled months ago when she started working late. She was disabling it. That was the moment I stopped breathing for a few seconds. I backed away from the window before I could be spotted and walked quickly down the block, numb, stunned, and not sure if I wanted to scream or curl into myself. Back at the apartment, I didn't sit down. I just stood in the doorway, staring at everything as if I were seeing it for the first time. The furniture we picked out. The wedding photo still on the bookshelf. The slippers she refused to throw out. All of it felt like props from someone else's movie. Someone who didn't exist anymore. Later that evening, I got the call. It wasn't from Callie. It was from her sister, Melody. Hey, she said, her voice hesitant, I don't want to get in the middle of anything, but, you should know, Callie's been spending a lot of time with someone named Aaron. I didn't say anything. My throat had tightened into something almost painful. She told me it was nothing, Melody continued, just a friend from college. But I overheard something on the phone last night when she thought I was asleep. Everett, she said she doesn't know if she wants to come back. I think I muttered a thank you. I think I hung up. I don't really remember. But I remember standing there, holding my phone like it weighed 1,000 pounds, and realizing, this wasn't about Beck. It was never about Beck. There was someone else entirely. Someone I didn't even know existed. And she had already started building a life outside of me long before I noticed the cracks. And the worst part? I wasn't even angry. I was just tired. I didn't eat that day. I don't even remember drinking anything. I just sort of sat. I stared at the carpet for long stretches, wondering how many quiet moments like this she had used to plan something I never saw coming. I replayed conversations in my head, rewinding every laugh she faked, every compliment she dodged, every, I'm just tired, that used to mean nothing, now carrying weight like concrete. The worst part of betrayal isn't the lie. It's the realization that you were the only one living honestly. I kept thinking about the name Melody had mentioned, Aaron. It didn't ring any bells. Not someone from her office. Not anyone she'd ever casually brought up over dinner or in passing. But clearly someone important enough that she'd felt the need to hide him. Someone important enough that she had already started detaching from me before I noticed she was drifting. That night, against every ounce of pride I had left, I opened her old laptop, the one she used to use before upgrading last year. She'd forgotten to sign out of her cloud account on it. I had never opened it before. Never needed to. But now. I couldn't stop myself. I told myself it was to find answers. Closure. But I think deep down, I just wanted proof that I hadn't imagined the distance. Her messages were clean, nothing incriminating. But the photos? That's where I found him. There was an album labeled, Portland, Design Retreat. We never went to Portland. I opened it. Inside were 34 photos. Landscapes, group shots, selfies, and buried halfway through, there he was. Aaron. Same guy from the cafe. Navy jacket. Close-cut beard. Arm wrapped casually around her waist as if it had been there 100 times. In one picture, they were standing in front of a mural. She was laughing, the kind of laugh that starts in your eyes. The kind of laugh I hadn't seen from her in over a year. It wasn't just how close they stood. It was how right they looked together. That was what crushed me. And then, something worse, a video. It wasn't long. 20 seconds, maybe less. She was filming the skyline. You could hear her voice softly narrating, "Sunset in Portland, and this one's for Everett, because he'd probably rather die than be dragged on a hike like this." Laughter. Not hers. His. She turned the camera to face them. They both smiled. She leaned her head into him. And right before the clip cut out, he said, "He doesn't know you like I do." That line hit harder than anything else. I shut the laptop. Sat still for maybe an hour. And then, like an idiot, I called her. She picked up this time. I didn't even say hello. I just said her name once, and silence filled the line. I asked one question, my voice barely holding together. "How long?" She didn't ask, "What do you mean?" She didn't pretend. Instead, she said, "Please, don't make this worse." That was her answer. I asked again, this time louder, not caring that my voice cracked, "How long, Callie?" "Not like that," she whispered. "You don't understand." I laughed, the kind of laugh that burns your throat. "You're right. I don't." "Enlighten me." She said it started as a reconnection. That she knew Aaron in college. That they met again by accident at a conference. That it was harmless for months. That they talked about you all the time. As if that made it better. I asked her if they had ever crossed the line physically. She said nothing. And then I heard her breath hitch, the kind of breath you take when you're bracing for a blow. That's when I knew. She didn't need to say it. I ended the call. I didn't throw the phone. I didn't scream. I just placed it gently on the floor next to me and laid back on the cold hardwood, staring up at the ceiling like it might offer a new version of the truth. But it didn't. The truth was, the woman I loved had let someone else become her first call, her private smile, her shared future. And I was just a name left behind in a folder full of forgotten photos. I didn't leave the apartment for 2 days after that call. I didn't open the curtains. I didn't shower. I didn't answer any messages, even though her sister tried calling me 3 more times. My stomach ached from not eating, but food just felt like a pointless ritual, like putting gas in a car you never planned to drive again. There's something surreal about realizing you've been replaced. Not just emotionally, but fully. She had another version of life already running in the background while I still believed we were troubleshooting our connection. I thought we were buffering. But she'd already opened a new tab. And then, on the 3rd day, someone knocked on my door. It was a sharp knock, the kind that doesn't belong to a neighbor looking for a package or a friend stopping by. It was deliberate. Firm. I didn't move at first. I just sat there, staring at the door like it was a riddle. But the knock came again, followed by a voice I didn't recognize. "Everett. I know you're in there. Can we talk?" Male. Calm. Not forceful, not angry. Just, controlled. I opened the door. And there he was. Aaron. Not through a screen. Not in a blurry photo. Not with her beside him. Just Aaron. In person. In a dark blue jacket, same one from the Portland photos, standing outside my home, holding a folded piece of paper in his hand like it meant something. "I don't want trouble," he said quickly, his hands slightly raised. "I'm not here to fight. I think it's better if we talk man to man." That phrase hit me like acid. I should have slammed the door. Should have told him to go to hell. But instead, I just stood there like a statue, trying to process the sheer insanity of this man, the man who stole my wife, showing up at my doorstep with peace in his voice. He must have read my hesitation as permission, because he continued. She doesn't know I'm here. She'd hate that I'm doing this. But I've been in your position before, Everett. And I know how this ends if no one tells the truth. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, saying nothing. I didn't plan any of this, he said. We really did reconnect by accident. But it didn't stay innocent. And I don't think she ever stopped loving you, not fully, but she also never really stopped comparing everything to what she used to feel. I blinked, stunned by his bluntness. I wanted to interrupt, scream at him, tell him to go rot. But I couldn't move. I was too caught off guard by how genuinely sad he looked. Not smug. Not proud. Just like someone who had broken something valuable by mistake. She told me once that you always used to make her feel seen, he continued. And somewhere along the line, she said she felt invisible again. Like the only time you looked at her was when she was halfway out the door. Stop, I finally said, my voice hoarse. You don't get to do this. You don't get to walk into my life and narrate my side of it like you were watching from the balcony. He nodded, quietly. You're right. Then he handed me the paper. I didn't take it at first. He placed it on the floor between us. It's nothing dramatic, he said. Just, something she wrote. Months ago. When she was still deciding. I found it in my bag last week. Thought maybe you deserved to read it. And with that, he walked away. Just turned and left. No grand exit. No final word. No smug grin. I stood in the doorway for another minute before picking up the folded paper and closing the door behind me. I sat at the table, unfolded it, and stared at the handwriting I knew like my own. It wasn't a letter addressed to me. It wasn't even signed. It was more like a stream of thoughts. Messy. Raw. Unfinished. I think I love both of them in different ways. One knows my history. The other knows my now. I'm afraid I'll regret staying. But I'm terrified I'll ruin him if I go. How do you leave someone who hasn't done anything wrong? I read it 5 times. Maybe 6. And every time, I felt smaller. Not because she was torn, but because even in her private thoughts, I was still just an obstacle between her and something new. She wasn't confused. She was calculating which damage would weigh less. And I realized then, I was never being chosen. I was being postponed. 3 days after Aaron left that piece of paper, I still hadn't told anyone what happened. I didn't text her sister. Didn't tell my best friend, who had been checking in every couple days. I didn't even journal about it, which is something I used to do when I was trying to understand my own thoughts. But this time, I didn't want clarity. I wanted to sit in the fog because clarity meant facing the truth. I hadn't thrown the note away. I couldn't. It sat on the coffee table like a cursed artifact. I must have read it 50 times. Not because it changed, but because I kept hoping my interpretation of it would. That somehow, the more I read it, the less cruel it would feel. That maybe I'd discover a hidden line that said, but I still choose him. But no. It stayed the same. Every time. Then, just when I thought she had disappeared for good, Callie showed up. No warning. No message. No knock. I heard the front door unlock and open like it always used to, like she still lived here. I was sitting on the floor in the hallway, back against the wall, legs stretched out. I didn't even react when I heard her footsteps. When she saw me, she paused. I didn't expect you to be right there, she said quietly. I didn't move. Figured you'd be back eventually. She looked tired. Not in a pitiful way, in a way that made me realize she'd already made peace with her decisions. She wasn't frantic. She wasn't broken. She wasn't coming to beg. She was just here. I wanted to talk, she said, dropping her keys on the console table the same way she always did. I stood slowly, watching her. So talk. She took a breath. I'm not going to make excuses. You already know most of it. I didn't answer. She continued, I didn't come to ask for forgiveness. And I'm not going to pretend that I deserve your kindness. I owed you the truth. Face to face. I waited, arms crossed, heart somewhere between heartbreak and rage. Her voice softened, but not with pity, with finality. I fell in love with someone else. And not because you did anything wrong. You were kind. You were thoughtful. You were steady. But somewhere along the way, I stopped feeling alive. I laughed, short, sharp, bitter. So you traded steady for exciting? She flinched a little. I traded numbness for something that made me feel seen again. You mean you traded a home for a hotel room? I snapped, the words escaping before I could stop them. She blinked fast but didn't cry. That somehow made it worse. She wasn't even pretending this hurt her the way it destroyed me. I know you're angry, she said softly. You have every right to be. No, I said, shaking my head, my voice cracking. I'm not angry. I'm humiliated. I let myself believe you were still mine while you were already gone. I defended you in my own head even when the truth was screaming at me. She sat on the edge of the couch, fingers fidgeting with the hem of her sleeve. Everett. I didn't plan this. I didn't set out to hurt you. But you did. You hurt me when you laughed with him while I stood 5 feet away. You hurt me when you turned off your location like I was some stalker. You hurt me when you decided he was your present and I was just a sentimental old photograph. Silence hung in the room like a noose. Then, she said it, the thing I didn't want but expected. I'm moving in with him. I nodded slowly, not because I accepted it, but because my body had no other response left. It was like being told a fire had already burned your house down and all that was left was ash. She stood. I'll send for the rest of my things. And then she walked toward the door. But just before she stepped out, she turned back and said the most gutting sentence I've ever heard in my life. Please don't hate me. I never stopped caring, just not in the way you wanted me to. And then she was gone. No hug. No breakdown. No apologies worth anything. Just a door that clicked shut behind the woman who used to be my world, now walking into a future I wasn't even allowed to witness. I stood there for a long time, staring at that closed door. Then I sat back down in the same hallway spot and whispered, to no one. I didn't hate you. I just finally believed you. The days after she left didn't feel like freedom, they felt like withdrawal. I expected the pain, the sadness, the loneliness. But what hit me the hardest was the silence. Not just the lack of her voice, but the absence of someone to lie to myself for. That sounds twisted, I know. But for so long, I'd been convincing myself that we were fixable, that she just needed time, that if I stayed patient enough, loyal enough, still enough, she'd come back to me completely. And now that fantasy was gone. Nothing to shield me from the truth. No illusions left to hide behind. I started walking at night. Just out the door, no destination. Sometimes around the block, sometimes for hours until my legs ached. I didn't want to be seen. I didn't want to talk to anyone. But one evening, after nearly 2 hours circling unfamiliar streets, I returned home to find an envelope tucked under my door. No stamp, no return name. Just my name scribbled in handwriting I hadn't seen in years. Melody. Her sister. Inside was a short letter and a folded photo. I sat down at the kitchen table, unsealed it slowly, and began to read. Everett. I know I probably shouldn't be reaching out. But I've watched this whole thing unfold from too close to stay quiet anymore. I'm not defending Callie. What she did to you, how she handled it, it's not okay. But there are things you don't know. And before you decide who you're going to become after this, I think you deserve to hear them. Callie didn't fall for Aaron recently. It started years ago. My breath caught. I kept reading. She never told you this, she didn't tell anyone but me, but she reconnected with Aaron while you were in the hospital after your appendectomy. Do you remember when she stayed late at work for that product pitch? That was the night they first met again. She told me she didn't plan it. Said it was harmless. That it felt like a familiar place when she felt disconnected from you. I begged her to tell you the truth. But every time I pushed, she said it would destroy you. She wasn't wrong. But hiding it didn't save you either. I folded the letter slowly, my heart racing. But it wasn't the words that rattled me, it was the photo she enclosed. I unfolded it with trembling hands. It was a picture of Callie and me. From years ago. Before the wedding. We were at her family's lake house, sitting on a dock, legs dangling over the water, heads leaning together. And behind us, slightly out of focus in the background, was Aaron. Shirtless. Holding a beer. Looking directly at Callie. That wasn't just a coincidence. He had always been there. He had always been part of the story, even when I thought he was just a forgotten name. And she knew. All those years, all the promises, all the times she said I was her, forever, he was there. In the shadows. Waiting. Or worse, being waited for. I sat in that chair until the sky turned dark and my phone buzzed with a new message. It was from a number I didn't recognize. Hey. It's Aaron. I didn't tell her I was coming by. But if you ever want to ask me anything, about anything, I won't lie to you. You deserve better than half-truths. No pressure. I won't contact you again unless you reach out. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I believed he meant well, but because, somehow, the man who helped dismantle my marriage was now offering more honesty than the woman I married ever gave me. I didn't reply. I still haven't. But I'll admit something I haven't told anyone, I wasn't broken when Callie left. I was broken the moment I realized I had never truly been chosen. Not at the beginning. Not at the end. Not once. It's strange what you miss after everything falls apart. Not the big things. Not the vacations or anniversaries or even the way she said your name. You miss the quiet things, the shared glances while brushing teeth, the familiar sound of her keys at the door, the way her hair always clogged the shower drain and drove you insane. You don't miss her, not anymore, but you miss who you thought she was. And who you thought you were when she chose you. But something unexpected happened after that final letter from Melody. I stopped asking why. I stopped replaying the details, trying to find the moment it all started unraveling. I stopped comparing myself to Aaron. I stopped trying to understand how someone could say they love you and still build a secret exit in the background. Because the truth is, love isn't always enough to keep someone honest. Sometimes, people love you in ways that have nothing to do with respect, and that's not your fault. 1 month later, I moved out of that apartment. I left the city entirely. Rented a small house near the edge of town with too much quiet and not enough furniture. And for the first time in years, I listened to silence not as punishment, but as permission. I started running again. Cooking for myself. Reading books without checking my phone. I even adopted a rescue dog named Mabel, who doesn't care that I'm bad at relationships or that I once let someone hollow me out like a basement. She just sits by the door every evening like I'm worth waiting for. A few weeks ago, I bumped into someone at the bookstore. Her name's Robin. She dropped a copy of Slaughterhouse-Five and laughed when I picked it up and said, "That's a bold choice for a first impression." We talked for almost an hour in the aisle. Not flirting. Not performing. Just two people connecting without pretense. We've had coffee twice since then. She asks questions and actually listens to the answers. It's terrifying. It's slow. It's real. And no, I'm not saying I found my next forever. But I did find myself again. And I realized something important: you don't have to win after heartbreak. Sometimes, healing is the quiet decision to stop giving your story to someone who never read past the first chapter. So yeah, I lost my marriage. I lost the woman I thought would grow old with me. But I kept my heart. And I finally started using it for myself. If this story meant something to you, share your thoughts below. Have you ever experienced a moment where silence spoke louder than betrayal? Tell us in the comments. Your story might be the one someone else needs to read tonight. Thanks for watching. You're on Reddit Confessions, where the truth hurts, heals, and sometimes surprises us. Until next time, take care of your heart. It's listening more than you think.